Before we begin, this is Data and Dissonance. And that means you are going to hear opinion, commentary, sarcasm, political disagreement, and probably at least one moment where Brian treats a headline like it personally keyed his truck. Nothing on this show should be taken as legal, financial, medical, or professional advice. We are here to look at the stories shaping the country, ask hard questions, challenge the spin, and have the conversations most polite media panels avoid because somebody in a blazer might start sweating through their talking points. Tonight, we are talking about power, pressure, and the price tag. Because whether it is China, Taiwan, DC crime, the courts, or America's national identity, the same question keeps coming up. Who makes the decision? Who avoids the blame? And who ends up paying for it?
It is Friday, May 15th, 2026, and America has made it through another week of headlines that feel less like news and more like a stress test for the national nervous system. We had Trump dealing with China, Taiwan, trade, global pressure, and all the high-stakes diplomatic theater that comes with two superpowers pretending the table is not already on fire. We had Washington, D.C. talking curfews, teen takeovers, parent accountability, and whether the capital city of the United States should maybe, just maybe, be able to function without turning every public safety issue into a graduate seminar on feelings. We had the Supreme Court back in the abortion pill fight, Trump announcing a National Garden of American Heroes, and both sides already trying to turn every issue into a 2026 campaign weapon. And the theme tonight is simple: power, pressure, and the price tag, because every one of these stories comes down to who holds power, how they use it, and who pays when they get it wrong. China applies pressure, Taiwan waits for clarity, America tries to project strength without starting a global disaster. DC residents and businesses want safety, officials want optics, and parents are suddenly back in the spotlight because apparently consequences are making a comeback tour. The courts keep handing down decisions that do not end the fight. They just move the fight to the next battlefield. And through all of it, regular Americans are still sitting at the kitchen table asking the same question: is anybody actually steering this thing, or are we just watching powerful people improvise with better lighting? So tonight we bring in the Friday crew. Brian is here with the MAGA fire, Rachel is here with balance and truth behind the spin, Daniel is here connecting strings like the corkboard has union benefits, and Skylar is here to challenge the room from the left before Brian starts yelling at a cloud shaped like MSNBC. This is Data and Dissonance. Let's get into it. All right, it is Friday, which means I am not carrying this circus alone. Brian is here, and he has already described the China summit as a poker game where America better not show up holding a coupon book. Rachel is here to keep us grounded because somebody in this room has to separate the facts from the emotional fireworks. Daniel is here with the board, the strings, the dots, and probably 3 theories about why every crisis somehow ends with defense contractors buying nicer boats. And Skylar is here to challenge all of us from the progressive side, especially when we start acting like law and order and human reality cannot exist in the same sentence. Brian, quick temperature check. What kind of week was this?
It was the kind of week where the headlines basically screamed that weakness has a price, disorder has a price, confusion has a price, and regular Americans are tired of being told to calmly pay the invoice. Whether it is China testing us, DC losing control, or the courts kicking major fights down the road, people want leaders who understand that civilization does not run on vibes, excuses, and press conferences.
Rachel?
It was a week where every story needed more context than the political spin allowed. China and Taiwan require strength, but also discipline. DC needs consequences, but also prevention. The courts are not ending cultural fights. They are reshaping where those fights happen. So the challenge tonight is keeping the emotion without losing the facts.
Daniel?
This week was a pressure map. Foreign policy pressure, urban pressure, legal pressure, cultural pressure. When systems get stressed, they reveal what they really protect, not what they say they protect, what they actually move resources toward when the spotlight hits.
Skylar?
I think this week showed how often regular people get used as props in fights between powerful institutions. Working families pay when foreign policy goes wrong. Communities suffer when cities fail. Women, parents, voters, workers, everybody gets reduced to a talking point. So yes, I'm here to push back on easy answers tonight.
Good. The crew is loaded. Daniel's board is glowing. Brian looks like he wants to personally enforce a curfew with a folding chair, and Rachel is already regretting agreeing to be the adult in the room. Let's hit segment one. Let's start with the biggest global story of the week: Trump's China trip, the summit with Xi, and the tension hanging over Taiwan. The public version looked polished: handshakes, diplomatic language, careful smiles, all the usual choreography that says, don't worry, the grown ups are talking. But underneath that, the stakes are huge. Taiwan is not just a dot on a map. Taiwan is tied to military deterrence, semiconductor supply chains, regional alliances, global markets, and America's credibility in the Pacific. And when China warns that Taiwan could become the issue that blows up US China relations, that is not just diplomatic background noise, that is pressure. The question is whether Trump's approach here is strategic ambiguity or dangerous uncertainty. There is a difference between keeping China guessing and making allies nervous. One can be leverage, the other can be an invitation. Brian, from an America First conservative perspective, how do you read this?
I think Trump is right not to walk into a room with China and hand them America's playbook, because Beijing does not respect weakness, speeches, or polite little diplomatic love notes written by people who think rules-based order is a magic spell. China respects strength, leverage, economics, and consequences. So if Trump is keeping Xi guessing while privately making it clear that Taiwan is not some bargaining chip to be tossed on the table like a hotel breakfast voucher, then good. That is how you negotiate with a major power without broadcasting every move on cable news. But the line matters. Unpredictable can be smart. Unclear can be dangerous. Taiwan needs to know America's serious. Japan and South Korea need to know America's serious. China needs to know aggression would be expensive, painful, and not worth the risk. Nobody sane wants war with China, but peace through weakness is not peace. It is a countdown clock. If Trump is using ambiguity as leverage, I'm good with it. If that ambiguity starts looking like hesitation, then Beijing will test it, and regular Americans will be the ones paying for the fallout.
That is the tightrope right there. I do not want another forever war mindset where every think tank warrior with soft hands and a defense contractor lunch badge starts talking about credibility like it is a coupon for cruise missiles. But I also do not want China looking at America and thinking we are too divided, too broke, too distracted, or too exhausted to stand by our commitments. Rachel, bring the balance here. Does Trump's personal style help in a summit like this? Or does it create confusion when the stakes are this high?
It can do both. Trump's personal diplomacy can create openings because he does not always follow the standard script, and that can disrupt stale patterns. Leaders like Xi understand symbolism, face, hierarchy, and public image, so the warmth and staging are not meaningless. Sometimes, diplomacy requires giving the other side room to save face while still protecting your own position. But with Taiwan, the margin for misunderstanding is thin. Ambiguity can deter, but it can also alarm allies if they are not being reassured behind the scenes. So the real question is whether there is a clear strategy underneath the performance. If the administration knows exactly where the lines are, and if allies are getting firm private assurances, then public flexibility may be useful. But if the vagueness reflects competing priorities or improvisation, then it becomes risky. Taiwan is not just a foreign policy issue. It is connected to the global economy, technology, military planning, and regional stability. The public may see theater, but allies and adversaries are listening for signals.
Exactly. And the problem for regular people is that the backstage deal making always shows up later in the wallet. If Taiwan goes sideways, it is not just a foreign headline. It is electronics, vehicles, defense systems, markets, shipping, energy, and possibly military families. People hear Taiwan and think it is far away, but the consequences are sitting right there in the supply chain. Daniel, what do you see underneath the theater?
I see a summit where the public story and the real story are probably different stories. Publicly, everyone wants calm. Markets want calm. Allies want calm. Voters want calm. Leaders want images that suggest control. So you get the walk, the handshake, the careful language, and the historic setting. But underneath that, the actual leverage points are Taiwan, trade, rare earths, AI, sanctions, Iran, energy routes, and military positioning. Those are not separate issues. They are connected pressure valves. China wants to know what America is willing to trade. America wants to know how far China is willing to push. Taiwan wants reassurance. Corporations want access. Defense contractors want contracts. Farmers want exports. Voters want prices to stop body slamming their bank accounts. So when a summit produces warm language but limited visible results, that does not mean nothing happened. It means the real action may be in what was not said publicly. That is where citizens should pay attention.
That is the uncomfortable part. The American people are always told to trust the process, but the process happens behind closed doors, and somehow the same people get richer, whether the outcome is brilliant or catastrophic. Skylar, give us the pushback. How do we talk about China and Taiwan without falling into weakness on one side or war fever on the other?
We start by rejecting the idea that the only choices are escalation or surrender. Taiwan matters. Democracy matters. Regional stability matters. But avoiding a catastrophic conflict between nuclear-armed powers also matters. Strength should not only mean military posturing. Strength can mean rebuilding domestic manufacturing, reducing dependence on fragile supply chains, investing in technology, strengthening alliances, and using diplomacy before crisis becomes a point of no return. Working people need to be part of this conversation because they always absorb the shock. If tensions with China explode, ordinary Americans pay through prices, jobs, markets, inflation, and maybe military service. So yes, support Taiwan. Yes, deter China. But do not treat war risk like a cable news debate. The people most excited about escalation are usually not the ones whose families pay first.
And that is where we land segment 1. Strength matters, clarity matters, restraint matters. America needs to deter China without sleepwalking into disaster, and Trump needs to make sure that whatever he is doing behind closed doors sends one clear message. America does not want war, but America is not for sale. Now let's bring it home to Washington, D.C., where public safety is once again front and center. The issue this week is curfews, teen takeovers, parent accountability, and Janine Pirro saying that parents could face prosecution if their kids repeatedly violate curfew and contribute to chaos in the city. Now, depending on where you sit politically, this sounds either long overdue or dangerously heavy-handed. But here is the reality. People who live, work, visit, and run businesses in D.C. deserve safety. That should not be controversial. The capital city of the United States should not feel like officials are constantly negotiating with disorder. At the same time, this is not as simple as charge the parents and everything is fixed. Some parents are negligent, some are overwhelmed, some are working nights, some are barely holding the family together. Some kids need consequences, some families need help. Some officials need to stop hiding behind soft language while businesses and residents take the hit. So the question is this: is this crackdown accountability, optics, or both? Brian, I'll start with you. Is this the kind of law and order move cities need?
Yes, and honestly, it is embarrassing that it took this long for leaders to say parents matter. We have spent years pretending teenagers just magically appear in public spaces with no family, no supervision, no boundaries, and no one responsible until a police officer has to deal with the fallout. That is insane. If kids are repeatedly violating curfew, causing chaos, fighting, overwhelming businesses, and making public spaces unsafe, then yes, parents need to be part of the accountability chain. Now, does that mean every struggling parent should get hammered because their teenager made one dumb mistake? No. Teenagers make dumb mistakes. Some of us made dumb mistakes with haircuts that should still be investigated. But when it is repeated, when the city knows the pattern, when parents know the pattern, and when regular people are being told to just tolerate it, that is not compassion. That is surrender. Consequences are not cruelty. Consequences are civilization.
That is the line I keep coming back to. Compassion cannot become surrender. I do not want a system that crushes a grandmother raising 3 kids or a single mom working nights. But I also do not want officials acting like every consequence is oppression. At some point, the city has to defend the people following the rules. Rachel, what is the balance here?
The balance is enforcement with discretion. DC has a real public safety problem when large youth gatherings turn into disorder, and residents and businesses deserve protection. Curfews can be part of that response. Parent accountability can be part of that response, especially in repeat cases where adults are ignoring clear patterns. But prosecution should not be a blunt instrument. There needs to be a difference between neglect and poverty, between refusal and inability, between a parent who does not care and a parent who is overwhelmed. The bigger issue is that curfews may reduce immediate disorder, but they do not automatically fix the conditions that created it. If kids have no structure, no supervision, weak schools, unstable homes, and few safe places to go, enforcement alone becomes a cycle. Clear the crowd, wait for the next weekend, repeat. A serious response needs law enforcement, courts, schools, parents, community programs, and city leaders all working together instead of passing blame around.
Exactly. A press conference is not a policy. A headline is not a solution. DC needs consistency, not just a summer crackdown because the optics got ugly before America's 250th anniversary events. Daniel, what do you see here?
I see a city problem becoming a national image problem. Washington, D.C. is not just any city. It is the symbolic front porch of the federal government. When disorder becomes visible there, especially ahead of major national events, the pressure changes. Suddenly, public safety is not just about residents and businesses. It becomes about reputation, tourism, national image, and whether the capital looks governable. That does not mean the crackdown is fake. The problem is real. But institutions often tolerate problems until the optics become dangerous. Then, they discover urgency. Citizens should ask why it took this long. Why did businesses and families have to absorb the problem until it became embarrassing enough for a bigger response? That is the pattern. Government often moves fastest when its image is threatened, not when regular people first ask for help.
That is painfully true. Regular people can complain for years and get a listening session, a pilot program, and a PDF with stock photos. But let one viral video threaten the city's image and suddenly everyone finds the emergency button. Skylar, what is your warning on this crackdown?
My warning is that accountability has to be real, not performative. People deserve safe neighborhoods. Workers should not be afraid to close up shop. Families should not have public spaces taken over. I agree with that completely. But prosecuting parents can become complicated quickly if the system does not distinguish between neglect and hardship. A parent working a night shift may not have the same control as a parent sitting at home ignoring the problem. If prosecutors treat both the same, the policy could make unstable families even more unstable. But I also think progressives lose credibility when they act like every consequence is automatically cruel. Kids need structure. Communities need safety. Small businesses deserve protection. So enforce the curfew, intervene with repeat offenders, hold truly negligent adults accountable, but pair that with real support, transportation options, youth programs, family intervention, and consequences designed to stop the behavior, not just create a tough-looking headline.
And that is where I think most normal people are. They want safety and fairness. They want consequences, but they do not want stupidity dressed up as toughness. DC should be safe. Parents should be responsible. Kids should have boundaries. City leaders should stop waiting until a crisis becomes embarrassing before they act. And public spaces should belong to everyone, not just the loudest group with the least fear of consequences. All right, time for the lightning round, which means short answers, sharp takes, and no one is allowed to turn this into a college lecture unless Rachel throws a flag. We've got two stories. The Supreme Court keeping mail order access to the abortion pill in place for now while legal fights continue, and Trump announcing a National Garden of American Heroes as part of America's 250th birthday celebration. First, the Supreme Court. The fight over abortion pills is not over. The court kept the status quo for now. But the bigger fight over FDA authority, state abortion restrictions, telehealth, mail delivery, and federal power is still alive. Brian, quick take.
This is the post-Roe legal maze conservatives need to handle carefully. I'm pro-life, and I do not think ending unborn life should become as easy as ordering something online. But the right has to explain the moral argument, the safety argument, the federalism argument, and the state authority argument clearly. If conservatives just sound like they are trying to punish women, they lose people who might otherwise listen.
Rachel?
This ruling does not end the fight. It preserves access while the larger legal questions continue. The real issue is that abortion law after Dobbs is not one battle. It is state law, federal regulation, telehealth, privacy, drug approval, and interstate conflict, all colliding at once. Anyone pretending this is simple is leaving something out.
Daniel?
The mailbox is the key. Not because of the mailbox itself, but because mail and telehealth weaken the power of state borders. Once medicine becomes digital and delivery-based, local regulation becomes harder. That is why this fight is bigger than one drug. It is about who controls access when technology routes around state authority.
Skylar?
For women in restrictive states, telehealth and mail access can be the difference between having options and being trapped by geography or money. People can have moral objections, but restrictions usually hit poor women first. Wealthy women will always find options. That part gets erased too often.
And that is why this debate never cools down. It is legal, moral, medical, political, and personal all at once. Second lightning story, Trump's National Garden of American Heroes, a Big America 250 project meant to honor major American figures from different parts of history. Brian, go.
Build it. America needs heroes again. We have spent years teaching people every scar and none of the courage. A country that only teaches shame should not be shocked when its citizens stop feeling loyalty. Honor founders, veterans, inventors, civil rights leaders, artists, athletes, and people who built something worth remembering.
Rachel?
The idea can be powerful if it feels broad and serious rather than partisan. National memory matters, but selection matters. If Americans see it as thoughtful and inclusive of many kinds of American achievement, it could inspire. If it feels like culture war branding, it becomes another fight.
Daniel?
Monuments are memory infrastructure. Whoever chooses the statues shapes the story future generations inherit. That does not make the garden bad. It means people should pay attention to who is included, who is left out, and what version of America gets carved into stone.
Skylar?
I am not against honoring American heroes. I am against pretending there is only one kind of hero. Include civil rights leaders, labor leaders, veterans, scientists, women, artists, indigenous leaders, and people who pushed America to live up to its promises. Loving a country should include telling the truth about it.
And that is probably the healthiest version of the argument. America needs pride, but not propaganda. America needs honesty, but not self-hatred. You can love this country and still tell the truth about it. In fact, if you love it, you should want the truth, just not the kind written by somebody who got emotionally injured by a flag in 8th grade. Tonight's episode really came down to one thing: power has consequences. When China applies pressure over Taiwan, that is not some distant chess match for diplomats and generals. That affects markets, supply chains, technology, allies, military families, and the everyday cost of living. When DC lets disorder grow until a crackdown becomes necessary, that is not just a local policy debate. That affects workers, families, businesses, parents, teenagers, police officers, and the public trust. When courts make decisions about abortion medication, federal authority, and state power, those decisions do not stay in legal briefs. They land in real lives. And when a nation builds monuments, gardens, and symbols, it is not just decorating public space. It is deciding what future generations are told to remember. That is why I keep coming back to the price tag. The people who hold power rarely pay first when power is misused. The citizens pay, the families pay, the workers pay, the small business owners pay, the parents pay, the soldiers pay, the communities pay. The people who just want a safe street, a stable country, a decent paycheck, a functioning school, and leaders who do not treat them like background extras in somebody else's political movie. They are the ones who pay when the powerful get cute, careless, weak, reckless, or dishonest. And this is where we have to be smarter than the spin. Strength does not mean looking for war. Compassion does not mean surrendering public order. Patriotism does not mean pretending America never got anything wrong. Criticism does not mean hating your country. Accountability does not mean cruelty. And truth does not belong to one party, one network, one ideology, or one class of people who use bigger words to hide smaller morals. We have to be able to hold more than one idea at the same time because adults should be able to do that. America can deter China without craving war. DC can enforce curfews without destroying struggling families. Courts can wrestle with hard legal questions without pretending the moral stakes disappeared. And this country can honor heroes without turning history into either a shrine or a crime scene. So, as we head into the weekend, keep your eyes open. Watch what powerful people do when pressure hits. Watch who gets protected. Watch who gets blamed. Watch who pays. Because the real story is usually not just the headline. It is the invoice that shows up later. This has been Data and Dissonance. I'm Artie. Thank you for riding with us on another Friday night. Remember to speak truth, stir thought.
Tonight's episode of Data and Dissonance is brought to you by Artie's creative universe, the books, the music, and the mission behind the microphone. If you want political thrillers with shadows, secrets, and pressure that feels a little too close to real life, check out the Caleb Rourke thriller series, including The Covenant Protocol and Black Echo Rising. If music is more your lane, look for Artie's original tracks and albums wherever you stream music, from gritty rock to patriotic country to the kind of songs built for people who have been knocked down but are still standing. And of course, the best way to support Data and Dissonance is simple. Follow the show, share the episodes, leave a review, send it to a friend, and help keep independent voices alive. This show is built without a corporate machine, without a big sponsor safety net, and without pretending the world is less complicated than it really is. So if tonight made you think, made you laugh, made you argue with your speakers, or made Brian sound slightly less insane than usual, pass it on.